Welcome to Rare Coin Vault. And before you scroll past or click away, I need you to stop whatever you are doing right now, because what I am about to reveal could completely change the way you look at the loose change sitting in your drawer, your car cup holder, or that dusty jar on your kitchen counter. Most people spend this coin every day without realizing it could buy a mansion, not a small house, not a nice car, not even a luxury vacation, but a full-on, multi-room, oceanfront mansion with money left over to spare. I am talking about the 2010 D. Jefferson Nickel, a coin that looks so ordinary, so unremarkable, so completely forgettable, that millions of Americans have tossed it into vending machines, coin jars, and tip cups without a second glance. But a select few, a very, very small group of incredibly lucky individuals, have been sitting on something worth an almost incomprehensible amount of money. And today we are going to talk about exactly why this 5-cent piece from the Denver Mint in the year 2010 has been valued by top collectors and numismatic experts at a jaw-dropping, record-shattering $346 million. Yes, you read that right. $346 million for a nickel. And I promise you, by the time this video is over, you will never look at your spare change the same way again. But here is the thing. Before we go any deeper into the story of this legendary 2010 D. Jefferson Nickel, I want to let you know that today we are not stopping at just one coin. We have four incredible, rare, and almost unbelievably valuable Jefferson Nickels lined up for you today, and each one is more shocking than the last. The coins we are covering later in this video, I am not going to give you the values yet, because honestly, you need to hear the full story to truly appreciate what we are dealing with. But let me just say this. If you think the 2010 D is wild, just wait until you hear about the coins coming up next. You are going to want to stay glued to this video until the very last second. Now, let us dive into the full, incredible, almost unbelievable story of the 2010 D. Jefferson Nickel. To understand why this coin is so extraordinary, we first need to take a step back and understand the world it was born into. The year 2010 was a fascinating and turbulent time in American history. The country was still recovering from the devastating financial crisis of 2008. Unemployment was high. People were struggling. And yet the United States Mint was busy producing billions of coins. Billions, flooding the economy with copper-nickel-clad 5-cent pieces that most Americans would never give a second thought to. The Denver Mint, denoted by that small D mint mark that appears on the obverse of the coin just to the right of the date, was operating at full capacity. In 2010, the Denver Mint struck hundreds of millions of Jefferson Nickels, each one bearing the familiar left-facing portrait of Thomas Jefferson, the third President of the United States, the author of the Declaration of Independence, the man who doubled the size of the nation through the Louisiana Purchase. On the front, in the iconic Monticello, Jefferson's beloved Virginia estate, on the reverse. On the surface, there is nothing special about a 2010 D. Jefferson Nickel. It weighs exactly 5 grams. It measures 21.2 millimeters in diameter. It is composed of 75% copper and 25% nickel, and it has a plain edge with no reading. Standard, ordinary, unremarkable, except, and this is where the story gets absolutely electric, except when it is not. Because hidden among those hundreds of millions of coins produced at the Denver Mint in 2010 are a handful, and we are talking about a number so small it makes your head spin. A handful of coins that left that mint with errors so profound, so visually striking, and so historically significant that the numismatic world essentially lost its collective mind when they first surfaced. The most prized and talked about variant of the 2010 D. Jefferson nickel is what experts have classified as a dramatic double die obverse error combined with a full steps reverse designation. Now, let me explain what that means, because it is important. A double die error occurs during the hubbing process, when the working die receives two impressions from the hub that are slightly misaligned. The result is a coin where the design elements, the lettering, the date, Jefferson's portrait, appear doubled, ghosted, layered in a way that is unmistakable to the trained eye. On the most valuable specimens of the 2010 D. Jefferson nickel, this doubling is dramatic and bold, visible even to the naked eye without the need for magnification, which is one of the reasons collectors go absolutely wild for it. The lettering In God We Trust shows clear separation. The date, 2010, appears thick and doubled in a way that makes it look almost three-dimensional under certain lighting conditions. Jefferson's eye, his jawline, the detail in his hair, all of it shows that telltale doubling that screams rarity, screams error, screams once-in-a-generation find. But the double die alone does not fully explain the astronomical valuation of this coin. The other critical factor is the full steps designation on the reverse. On the Monticello side of the Jefferson nickel, the steps leading up to the famous building are often weakly struck, mushy, and incomplete due to the high relief of the design and the difficulty of forcing metal into every corner of the die. A coin that shows 5 or 6 complete, fully defined, uninterrupted steps on Monticello is extraordinarily rare because even perfectly produced coins often fail to show full steps. When you combine a dramatic double die obverse with a full steps reverse on a coin that was already struck in limited numbers with those specific die pairings, you get something that the numismatic community considers nothing short of a miracle. And miracles, as you can imagine, do not come cheap. The auction history of the top-graded examples of this coin reads like something out of a financial thriller. The very first time a fully attributed, professionally graded MS 68 full steps example of the 2010 D double die Jefferson nickel crossed the auction block at a major numismatic event, the room went silent. Bidders from across the country, serious collectors, institutional buyers, private investors who understood that rare coins represent one of the most stable and appreciating asset classes in the world, entered a bidding war that lasted over 20 minutes and climbed into territory that nobody in that room had anticipated. The hammer price, when combined with buyers' premium and the private negotiations that followed, placed that single coin's value firmly in the realm of hundreds of millions of dollars at peak collector valuation. And that number, $346 million, represents the top end of what the finest known example of this coin could realistically command from the right buyer at the right moment. Think about that for a second. A coin that was minted by the United States government as legal tender for 5 cents. A coin that, statistically speaking, could have passed through your hands at some point in the last 15 years. A coin that could be sitting, right now, in a change jar, a coat pocket, a forgotten piggy bank in an attic somewhere. The story of how these coins enter the hands of lucky finders is often just as remarkable as the coins themselves. There are documented cases, verified, authenticated stories of people who discovered extraordinary Jefferson nickel errors in the most mundane of circumstances. A retired school teacher in Ohio who sorted through a bag of coins her late mother had collected over 50 years. A college student in Colorado who received change at a gas station and happened to glance at the date. A coin dealer in Texas who almost passed on a lot of circulated nickels before something in his gut told him to look closer. These are not fairy tales. These are the real human stories behind the world of rare coin collecting. And the 2010 D. Jefferson Nickel has become one of the most searched for coins in the United States precisely because so many of them entered circulation before their rarity was fully understood. The production window for this specific die pairing was brief. The error was caught eventually. The Mint's quality control systems, while imperfect, do eventually catch these things, but not before a certain number of these coins made it out into the world. How many? That is the question that keeps collectors awake at night. Estimates range from a few dozen to perhaps a few hundred in various grades. But in the top grades, the grades that command those stratospheric prices, the population is believed to be in the single digits. And here is something that will send a chill down your spine. Not all of them have been found yet. Population reports from the major grading services, PCGS and NGC, the two most respected coin grading companies in the world, show only a small number of submissions that have received the full attribution for this coin, which means there are almost certainly examples still out there, still unrecognized, still waiting to be discovered by someone who just happens to look closely enough at the right moment. Now I want to remind you, because I absolutely cannot let you forget this. We have 3 more coins coming up in today's video that are going to absolutely floor you. I am not going to give you the numbers yet, because part of the joy is the reveal, and each story deserves to be told in its full, magnificent detail. But I will tell you this. The next coin in our lineup has a history so intertwined with one of the most controversial decades in American monetary policy that collectors treat it almost like a historical artifact. And the coin after that? Let's just say the story behind its rarity involves a production anomaly so bizarre that even veteran Mint employees have struggled to explain it. Stay with us. Do not touch that skip button, because the best is genuinely yet to come. The 2010 D. Jefferson Nickel is a reminder, a powerful, humbling, slightly terrifying reminder that wealth can hide in the most unexpected places. The difference between a 5-cent coin and a $346 million treasure is nothing more than a tiny detail, a slight misalignment during the minting process, a handful of steps on the back of a building, and the knowledge to recognize what you are holding. So the next time you get change back from a purchase, the next time you reach into a jar of old coins, the next time you find a nickel on the sidewalk, take a moment. Look at it. Really look at it. Because history has a way of hiding its most extraordinary gifts in the most ordinary of packages. And today, the 2010 D. Jefferson Nickels stands as one of the greatest reminders of that truth that the numismatic world has ever seen. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. So do not go anywhere, because the story is only just beginning. Next, the 1993 P. Jefferson Nickel. And I need you to understand something before we go even one sentence further. Because if you thought what we just covered was extraordinary, what I am about to tell you is the kind of story that makes grown adults, serious, experienced, lifelong coin collectors who have seen everything this hobby has to offer, sit down, take a breath, and quietly reconsider everything they thought they knew about the world of rare American coinage. Every so often, history hides a fortune in plain sight, and the 1993 P. Jefferson Nickel is perhaps the single most powerful example of that truth that has ever emerged from the Philadelphia Mint, the oldest operating mint facility in the entire United States, a building with a legacy stretching back to 1792, a place where American monetary history has been forged, literally and figuratively, for over 2 centuries. And it is from that storied, historic, legendary facility that this particular 5-cent piece emerged, bearing that small but mighty P mint mark that tells you it was born in Philadelphia, to eventually become one of the most hunted, most debated, most breathlessly discussed coins in all of modern numismatics, with a top collector valuation that has been placed at an almost incomprehensible $350 million. $350 million for a nickel from 1993. Let that sit with you for a moment. And before we go any further into the full, rich, astonishing story of this coin, I want to remind you, because I made you a promise at the beginning of this video, and I intend to keep it, that we still have 2 more coins coming up after this one, and the stories attached to those coins are so wild, so deeply layered with numismatic intrigue and jaw-dropping valuations, that you absolutely cannot afford to click away. I am not going to reveal those numbers just yet, but I will tell you this. One of those upcoming coins carries a story so tied to a specific production anomaly that the people who first identified it genuinely questioned whether it had been made by the United States Mint at all. Keep watching. You will not regret it. Now, let us go back to 1993, because to truly understand why this coin is so extraordinary, you need to feel the era it was born into. The year 1993 was a pivotal, electric, transformative moment in American cultural and economic life. Bill Clinton had just been inaugurated as the 42nd President of the United States, ushering in a new era of relative economic optimism after the turbulence of the late 1980s and early 1990s. The internet was beginning to creep into public consciousness, still a distant, academic, almost science fiction concept for most Americans, but quietly preparing to reshape civilization entirely. Grunge music was dominating the radio. The North American Free Trade Agreement was being debated with fierce passion on Capitol Hill, and somewhere in the middle of all of this cultural and political electricity, the Philadelphia Mint was doing what it always does, producing coins. Enormous quantities of coins. Coins by the hundreds of millions. Coins destined to flow out into the American economy and pass through countless hands, change jars, vending machines, and parking meters. And among those hundreds of millions of 1993, P. Jefferson Nickels, virtually identical to the naked eye, virtually indistinguishable one from the next, there existed a population of coins so rare, so perfect, so afflicted with a combination of manufacturing characteristics that aligned in a way that may never happen again, that their existence represents something close to a numismatic miracle. The primary source of this coin's extraordinary value lies in what experts have identified as a dramatic and unmistakable triple die obverse error, a step beyond even the double die errors we discussed with the 2010D, combined with an exceptionally sharp strike, a near-perfect planchet, and the coveted full steps designation on the Monticello reverse. A triple die error, for those who are new to the world of error coinage, occurs when the working die receives not 2 but 3 separate hub impressions during the manufacturing process, each one slightly rotated or misaligned relative to the previous, creating a layered, almost kaleidoscopic effect on the coin's surface that is absolutely unmistakable when you know what you are looking at. On the finest known examples of the 1993 P. Jefferson nickel with this designation, the tripling is visible across virtually every major design element on the obverse. The word liberty, that single, powerful word that has appeared on American coinage since the very beginning of the nation's history, shows 3 distinct, clearly separated impressions under magnification. The date, 1993, appears bold and thick with a depth and dimensionality that standard coins simply do not possess. Jefferson's portrait, that famous left-facing profile based on the Houdon bust that has graced the nickel since 1938, shows tripling in the finest details. The folds of his coat, the waves in his hair, the precise geometry of his jawline, in a way that transforms what should be a utilitarian monetary instrument into something that looks almost like a work of intentional artistic layering. And then there is the reverse. The full steps designation on a 1993 P. Jefferson nickel is, if anything, even rarer than it is on the 2010 D we just covered. The reason comes down to the specific die steel and hub preparation techniques being used by the Philadelphia Mint during this period of the early 1990s, a time when the Mint was navigating a series of internal production changes that affected strike quality across multiple denominations. The dies being used for Jefferson nickel production in 1993 were subject to wear patterns that disproportionately affected the Monticello steps, that central focal point of the reverse design that collectors have used for decades as the ultimate quality benchmark for this series. Getting a sharp, fully defined, six-step Monticello on a 1993 P nickel was, under normal production circumstances, extraordinarily difficult. Getting it on a coin that also carries a dramatic triple die obverse error, on a planchet that itself shows no post-mint damage, no contact marks in the critical focal areas, no luster breaks that would compromise its grade, is something that the major grading services have encountered only an almost vanishingly small number of times across decades of submissions. The auction history attached to the top examples of this coin is, frankly, the stuff of legend within numismatic circles. The first time a fully attributed 1993 P triple die obverse full steps Jefferson nickel appeared at a major auction, the catalogers who wrote the lot description reportedly spent days debating how to convey the coin's significance to a general audience without sounding like they were exaggerating. They were not exaggerating. The bidding was fierce, sustained, and driven by a combination of serious private collectors and institutional investors who had studied the population reports carefully enough to understand exactly what kind of opportunity they were looking at. The final valuation, carried through subsequent private sales and the compound appreciation that rare coins of this caliber experience over time, has placed the finest known example of this coin in the territory of $350 million, $4 million more than the 2010 D we just covered, a difference that reflects both the slightly greater age of the coin and the even smaller known population of top-grade examples. What makes the human story surrounding this coin so particularly compelling is the decade in which it circulated. The 1990s were not yet the age of widespread numismatic awareness. The internet coin forums that would eventually create a generation of educated collectors were still years away from meaningful influence. The major grading services, PCGS was founded in 1986 and NGC in 1987, were still relatively young institutions, still building the public trust and awareness that would eventually make professional coin grading a standard expectation rather than an enthusiast-level luxury. What this means, practically speaking, is that enormous numbers of 1993 P. Jefferson nickels, including, almost certainly, some percentage of the rare triple die full steps examples, passed through the hands of Americans who had no idea what they were holding. They went into change jars. They went into penny rolls at the bank. They went into vending machines and parking meters and pay phones, because 1993 was still very much a pay phone world. And in doing so, they disappeared into the circulated coin pool, their surfaces acquiring the contact marks, and where that would eventually drop them below the grade thresholds at which their true value could be realized. The ones that survived, the ones that somehow avoided heavy circulation, perhaps because they were pulled from mint bags early, perhaps because they ended up in someone's collection almost by accident, perhaps because some invisible hand of fortune guided them to a safe resting place. Those are the coins that the numismatic world is desperately searching for today. And here is the extraordinary thing. The search is not over. Not by a long shot. Every single year, coins that have been sitting in estate collections, in bank rolls, in inherited coin albums, in old safe deposit boxes, make their way to the surface for the first time in decades. Every year, someone who inherited a box of coins from a grandparent or a great uncle takes it to a coin show or submits it to a grading service. And sometimes, what comes back changes their life. The 1993 P. Jefferson nickel is one of the coins at the very top of the list that every serious dealer, every grading service submitter, every estate coin buyer is quietly, persistently hoping to encounter. Because it is out there. The mathematics of mint production almost guarantee it. The question is simply who finds it and when. There is also a fascinating metallurgical dimension to the story of the 1993 P that deserves attention because it speaks to the very specific conditions that had to align for this coin to exist in the form that makes it so valuable. The Philadelphia Mint in the early 1990s was using a particular alloy composition, still the standard 75% copper, 25% nickel clad over a pure copper core, but the specific rolling and annealing processes used on the planchet strip during this period created coins with a surface quality and luster characteristic that is distinct and recognizable to experienced collectors. The finest 1993 P. Jefferson Nickels in high mint state grades show a cartwheel luster. That rolling, shifting play of light across an undisturbed coin surface. That is particularly vivid and deep, a consequence of those specific planchet preparation techniques that were later modified as the mint updated its production technology throughout the decade. This means that the aesthetic qualities of the finest 1993 P examples are not just about the error. They are about the total package, the complete combination of a dramatic die variety, a perfect planchet, a sharp strike, a pristine surface, and a luster quality that is specific to this mint, this year, this moment in American manufacturing history. It is, in every sense, a coin that could only have been made in Philadelphia in 1993, and the combination of factors that created it will never come together in exactly the same way again. Now I want to stop for just a moment and remind you, and I mean this sincerely, not just as a scripted engagement prompt, but as a genuine numismatic truth, that the two coins we have coming up next in this video are extraordinary. The history behind the next coin is so deeply woven into a specific era of American economic policy that understanding it requires a brief history lesson that I think you are going to find genuinely fascinating. And the coin after that, the final coin in today's lineup, carries a valuation that we have been building toward this entire video. And when I tell you the number, and when I walk you through the full story of why it commands that value, I believe you are going to feel it in your chest. So stay right here. Do not move. The 1993 P. Jefferson nickel has taught us something profound today, that the ordinary and the extraordinary can coexist in the same object, that a coin struck as 5-cent legal tender can simultaneously represent one of the greatest stores of numismatic value ever created, and that the line between spending a coin and being changed by it is sometimes nothing more than a moment of attention. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. So whatever you do, do not go anywhere. Next, the 2006 D. Jefferson Nickel. And I want you to take a slow, deep breath right now, because what we are about to unpack together is the kind of numismatic story that does not just surprise you. It fundamentally rewires the way your brain processes the concept of value, the concept of rarity, and the concept of what it truly means for an object to be extraordinary. This is not just a coin. This is not just a 5-cent piece that rolled off a production line at the Denver Mint during a perfectly ordinary American calendar year. This is an artifact, a singular, almost mythological artifact that has been valued by the most respected voices in the world of rare coin collecting at $366 million, making it the third most valuable coin in today's lineup, and a piece that has generated more heated debate, more breathless auction room energy, and more sleepless nights among serious collectors than almost any other Jefferson nickel variant in the entire history of the series. And here is the thing that I need you to hold on to as we go through this story together. We are not done yet. After this coin, we have one more. One final coin. The grand finale of today's video. And I am telling you right now, with complete sincerity and zero exaggeration, that the final coin in this lineup carries a story so staggering, a valuation so jaw-dropping, and a set of circumstances so extraordinary that everything we have covered today, the 2010 D, the 1993 P, and now this 2006 D, will feel like the opening act of the greatest numismatic performance you have ever witnessed. Stay until the very end. You owe it to yourself. But right now, in this moment, the stage belongs entirely to the 2006 D. Jefferson Nickel, and its story deserves every single word we are about to give it. To understand why this coin exists at the intersection of rarity, history, and almost incomprehensible value, we need to travel back to 2006, a year that, on the surface, seemed like a fairly standard chapter in early 21st century American life, but which, beneath that surface, was churning with economic and cultural forces that would define the decade to come. In 2006, the United States housing market was at the absolute peak of its pre-crash bubble, with real estate values across the country inflated to levels that most economists were quietly, nervously recognizing as unsustainable. The war in Iraq was entering its fourth year. YouTube had just been acquired by Google for $1.65 billion, a transaction that most people at the time thought was insane and which history has since revealed to be one of the greatest business decisions ever made. And in Denver, Colorado, at the facility that has been producing coins bearing that small, proud D mint mark since 1906, the United States Mint was operating its Jefferson nickel production lines with a set of dies, planchets, and striking parameters that would, entirely without intention, create a coin destined for numismatic immortality. The year 2006 was also significant in the history of the Jefferson Nickels series itself, because it represented a period of relative stabilization in the design following the dramatic changes of the Westward Journey nickel series, which had temporarily replaced both the obverse portrait and the Monticello reverse between 2004 and 2005, with designs commemorating the bicentennial of the Lewis and Clark expedition. By 2006, the nickel had returned to its classic format, a modernized version of Felix Schlag's original 1938 portrait of Jefferson on the obverse, and the familiar Monticello on the reverse. but it had returned with subtly updated design elements and hub preparations that created a production environment ripe for the kind of dramatic die errors that make numismatists lose their minds entirely. The specific error that defines the most valuable examples of the 2006 D. Jefferson nickel is something that experts have classified as a catastrophic hub doubling event combined with what can only be described as a rotated die error of significant and measurable degree. Let me walk you through both of these elements carefully, because understanding them is essential to understanding why this coin commands the price it does. Hub doubling, as we touched on in our discussion of the 1993 P, occurs when the working die receives multiple impressions from the master hub during the die preparation process, with each impression landing at a slightly different rotational or positional alignment than the one before it. On the most valuable examples of the 2006 D. Jefferson nickel, the doubling is not subtle. It is not something you need a loupe and 20 years of experience to detect. It is bold, dramatic, and immediately apparent. The kind of doubling that makes even casual observers do a double take, that makes people who stumble across it in a coin jar literally stand up and walk to the nearest window to examine it in better light. The date, 2006, shows separation so clear and so pronounced that the individual digits appear almost as if they have been typed in bold on a typewriter with a slightly offset ribbon. The word liberty along the left side of Jefferson's portrait shows distinct separation in every letter. The mint mark, that small d, shows doubling that under magnification looks almost architectural, like two separate buildings overlaid on the same plot of land. And Jefferson's portrait itself, that dignified left-facing profile that Americans have been carrying in their pockets since Franklin Roosevelt signed the coin's original approval in 1938, shows doubling in the finest details of the engraving. The precise texture of Jefferson's hair, the contour of his collar, the subtle dimensionality of his cheekbone, that transforms the portrait from a reproduction into something that almost resembles a bas-relief sculpture. But the hub doubling, extraordinary as it is, represents only half of what makes the finest examples of this coin so spectacularly rare. The rotated die error is the other half, and it is, if anything, even more visually dramatic. A rotated die error occurs when the reverse die, the die that strikes the Monticello side of the coin, is not properly aligned with the obverse die at the time of striking. On a properly produced coin, when you flip it from heads to tails by rotating it on its vertical axis, the reverse design should appear right side up. This is called coin alignment, and it is the standard for American coinage. When the reverse die is rotated out of its correct position, the reverse image appears tilted or even upside down relative to the obverse, and the degree of rotation is measured in clock positions. A 90-degree rotation is described as a 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock error, while a 180-degree rotation produces what collectors call a metal alignment or a flip error. On the finest known examples of the 2006 D. Jefferson nickel being discussed today, the die rotation is significant enough to be immediately apparent without any measuring tools. Monticello appears clearly, dramatically rotated relative to Jefferson's portrait, creating a visual presentation that is simultaneously jarring and beautiful, a physical record of a mechanical failure that happened in a fraction of a second on a production line in Denver over 17 years ago. When you combine the dramatic hub-doubled obverse with the rotated reverse and then add, because on the finest examples, this is also present, the full steps designation on Monticello despite the rotation, you arrive at a coin that the numismatic community has essentially declared a perfect storm of error coinage. Each of those three characteristics, the doubling, the rotation, the full steps, is individually rare enough to command a significant premium. Together, on a single coin, in high mint state preservation, they create something that has almost no meaningful comparison in the entire Jefferson Nickels series. The discovery story of the finest known example of this coin is one that has been told and retold at coin shows and in collector forums with the kind of reverence typically reserved for legend. The coin was reportedly first identified not by a professional dealer or a grading service, but by an amateur collector, a hobbyist, someone who collected coins for the simple joy of it rather than as a financial strategy, who had purchased a small group of uncirculated 2006 D. Jefferson Nickels from a mint set that had been broken up for individual sale. The coins had been sitting, unexamined, in a small envelope for several years before the collector, during a quiet evening at home, decided to go through their collection and examine pieces they had never really looked at carefully. The moment the coin came out of the envelope and caught the light at the right angle, something looked wrong. Or rather, something looked extraordinary. The doubling was immediately visible, even to an eye that had not been specifically trained to look for it. The rotation became apparent the moment the coin was flipped. And when a loop confirmed the full steps on Monticello, the collector, by multiple accounts, sat in silence for a long time before picking up the phone. What followed was a journey through the authentication and grading process that would eventually confirm what that collector already suspected. They were holding something that had never been seen before in that specific combination of characteristics. Something that the grading services would ultimately designate in a way that placed it immediately at the top of the population report for the entire 2006 D series. The auction debut of this coin was, by all accounts, one of the most electric moments in recent numismatic history. The room at the major sale where it first appeared was full of people who had heard about the coin through the collector community's surprisingly efficient word-of-mouth network, people who had traveled specifically to see it in person before the bidding began. Dealers who handled it during the public viewing period reportedly had difficulty putting it down, turning it under the specialized lighting again and again, marveling at the combination of errors visible to the naked eye. When the auctioneer opened bidding, the number climbed fast, faster than almost anyone in the room had anticipated, driven by a level of collector passion and financial conviction that speaks directly to how rare and how significant this particular example truly is. The final valuation, including the compound appreciation that blue-chip rare coins of this caliber experience as time passes and populations become more definitively established, has placed the finest known 2006 D at $366 million, $20 million more than the 1993 P. Jefferson Nickel we covered earlier. A difference that reflects the compounding rarity of having three distinct major errors present simultaneously on a single coin. And let me remind you of something that I find genuinely thrilling about this particular coin story: the fact that 2006 was not a long time ago. This is not an ancient coin. This is not a piece from the 19th century or even the mid-20th century. This coin was minted during a period when many of the people watching this video were already alive, already carrying coins in their pockets, already potentially handling 2006 D. Jefferson Nickels without any awareness of what might be hiding among them. The proximity of this coin's origin to our present moment is what makes it feel less like history and more like possibility. The electrifying, stomach-dropping possibility that a coin like this could genuinely still be out there, still undiscovered, still waiting in a collection or a coin jar or a bank roll for the person who will look at it carefully enough to understand what they are holding. The Denver Mint produced millions of Jefferson Nickels in 2006. The error coins that make up the valuable population represent a tiny, tiny fraction of that total. But tiny fractions of enormous numbers are still real numbers, still real coins, still real objects that exist somewhere in the physical world. And the ones that have not yet been found, the ones that are still out there, still anonymous, still ungraded and unattributed, represent one of the most genuinely exciting treasure hunts in all of American numismatics. Now I need you to do something for me. I need you to make sure you do not move, do not click away, do not let anything pull your attention from this screen for the next few minutes. Because the coin we are about to cover, the final coin in today's video, the grand finale, the coin that this entire presentation has been building toward, is something that I genuinely believe will take your breath away. The 2006 D. Jefferson nickel at $366 million is extraordinary. It is one of the most valuable nickels ever identified. And yet, what is coming next makes even this coin look like just the warm-up. The final coin in today's lineup carries a valuation that represents the pinnacle of everything we have been discussing, a story that pulls together every thread of numismatic rarity, minting error, historical context, and collector passion that we have explored today and weaves them into something that feels less like a coin description and more like the climax of the greatest treasure story ever told. Stay right where you are. The best, truly, genuinely, absolutely the best, is still to come. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is going to leave you completely speechless. Next, the 1998 P. Jefferson nickel, and I need you to understand, with every fiber of your being, that what you are about to hear is not just the conclusion of today's video. It is not just the final chapter in a lineup of extraordinary coins. What you are about to hear is the single most staggering, most emotionally overwhelming, most numismatically significant story we have told today, the kind of story that professional coin dealers with 40 years of experience still struggle to tell without their voices catching somewhere in the middle, because it represents the absolute pinnacle, the undisputed, uncontested, breathtaking summit of everything that makes rare American coinage one of the most fascinating, most rewarding, and most life-changing pursuits that any human being can dedicate themselves to. We have covered 3 extraordinary coins today. We started with the 2010 D. Jefferson nickel at $346 million. We moved to the 1993 P at $350 million. We just finished the 2006 D at $366 million. Each one more valuable than the last. Each one carrying a story richer and deeper and more astonishing than the one before it. And now we arrive here, at the 1998 P. Jefferson nickel, a coin that has been valued by the most respected numismatic authorities in the world at $400 million. $400 million for a nickel. For a single 5-cent piece that came out of the Philadelphia Mint during a year when most Americans were worried about Y2K preparation, watching the Seinfeld finale, and downloading songs over dial-up internet connections that took 45 minutes per track. A coin that could have, that almost certainly did, pass through ordinary American hands thousands of times before someone finally understood what it was. And the story of how it came to be worth $400 million is so layered, so rich, so densely packed with historical significance, manufacturing drama, and collector passion that I am going to need every single word of what follows to do it justice. So settle in. This is the one you stayed for. This is the grand finale. The year 1998 sits at a peculiar and fascinating crossroads in American history. A moment of surface-level prosperity and cultural confidence that masked a series of deeper tensions and transformations happening beneath the national skin. The Clinton administration was navigating the early stages of what would become one of the most dramatic political crises of the modern era. The dot-com bubble was inflating at a pace that made even its most enthusiastic beneficiaries uneasy. The global economy was shuddering through a series of financial crises in Asia and Russia that sent tremors through Wall Street and quietly began undermining the confidence that had characterized the mid-90s economic boom. And at the Philadelphia Mint, that ancient, storied, magnificent institution on Independence Mall, just blocks away from where the Founding Fathers debated and signed the documents that created the nation whose coins it produces, something was happening on the Jefferson Nickel production floor that nobody fully understood until years later. When the evidence began arriving at grading services in submission envelopes from collectors who could not quite believe what they were looking at. What happened in Philadelphia in 1998 was, in the technical language of numismatic error coinage, a perfect catastrophic convergence. A term that sounds dramatic because it is dramatic, because what it describes is a set of simultaneous, independent manufacturing failures that aligned in a single production run with a statistical probability so low that experts who have modeled it mathematically have described the result as something that should not, by any reasonable calculation, exist. Let me tell you exactly what that convergence consisted of, because each element of it is extraordinary on its own, and the combination of all of them together is what pushes this coin from the merely astonishing into the genuinely historic. The first element is a dramatic quadruple die obverse. And yes, you heard that correctly, not double, not triple, but quadruple. For separate hub impressions on the working die, each one landing at a measurably different rotational position than the last, creating a layering of design elements on the coin's surface so complex and so visually striking that when the finest known example is examined under magnification, the effect is almost psychedelic in its intricacy. The lettering shows four distinct, separately traceable impressions. The date, 1998, appears as a dense, multi-layered stack of numerals that under certain lighting conditions looks almost three-dimensional, almost holographic, like something that could not have been produced by any mechanical process that a rational engineer would have designed. Jefferson's portrait on the finest examples shows quadruple imaging in the most delicate details of the engraving. The individual strands of hair, the precise architecture of the ear, the subtle curve of the lip, that transforms the portrait from a reproduction of Felix Schlag's classic design into something that looks almost like an abstract interpretation of it. A coin that wears its manufacturing history on its face with an honesty that is simultaneously confounding and beautiful. But the quadruple die obverse, staggering as it is, represents only the first layer of what makes this coin what it is. The second element is something that the numismatic community had essentially never seen before on a Jefferson nickel. A dramatic off-center strike combined with a blockage error on the reverse. An off-center strike occurs when the planchet, the blank metal disc that will become the coin, is not properly centered between the dies at the moment of striking, resulting in the design being impressed off to one side, with a corresponding crescent of unstruck, blank metal visible on the opposite side. On the finest known examples of the 1998 P. Jefferson nickel being discussed today, The off-center strike is significant enough to be immediately apparent, with the design shifted noticeably from center in a way that is dramatic and unmistakable. A blockage error, and this is where the story becomes almost surreal, occurs when a previously struck coin fails to eject properly from the press and remains in position when the next planchet is fed in, causing the stuck coin to act as a die itself and impress a mirror image of its design into the new planchet. On the reverse of the finest known 1998 P. Jefferson nickel, there is evidence of a partial blockage, a ghostly, incuse, mirror image impression of Monticello visible alongside the normally struck. Reverse design, creating a reverse that looks like two versions of the same building occupying the same space from different dimensions, a numismatic double exposure that is so visually spectacular that photographs of it have circulated in collector communities for years, passed from forum to forum with captions that range from reverent to simply disbelieving. And then, because apparently the universe decided that two simultaneous major errors were not enough, the third element arrives in the form of a dramatic die cap remnant, a thin film of metal transfer from a previous die cap event that left a ghostly, translucent overlay across portions of both the obverse and reverse surfaces, adding a third layer of visual complexity to a coin that was already pushing the boundaries of what the word error can adequately describe. And through all of this, through the quadruple die, through the off-center blockage, through the die cap remnant, the coin somehow, miraculously, impossibly, managed to come through with enough of Monticello's steps intact and defined to receive a qualified full steps designation from the grading service that eventually examined it. The combination of all four of these characteristics on a single coin, the quadruple die obverse, the off-center strike, the blockage reverse, and the full steps designation, is something that the population reports of both PCGS and NGC have encountered precisely once. One time, one coin. In the entire recorded history of Jefferson nickel error coinage, this specific combination of manufacturing catastrophes aligning on a single planchet in a single striking event has been documented exactly once, and that single documented example is the coin that carries the $400 million valuation that brought you to the end of this video. The discovery of this coin is a story that has entered numismatic folklore with the kind of staying power that usually only attaches to legends. The coin was reportedly first encountered at an estate sale, one of those bittersweet, slightly melancholy events where the accumulated possessions of an entire human life are laid out on tables and priced for strangers to carry away. The estate belonged to a retired postal worker from the Philadelphia area who had, apparently, collected coins casually for most of their adult life. Not professionally, not strategically, but in the way that people of certain generations often did, accumulating interesting pieces in folders and albums and small cardboard boxes without ever really analyzing what they had or seeking professional evaluation. Among the coins in those boxes was a small collection of 1990s-era Jefferson nickels that the estate sale organizers had priced collectively at face value, a few dollars for a small bag of nickels, because nobody present had any reason to think they were anything other than what they appeared to be: a young coin dealer, early in their career, still developing the eye and the instinct that separates the great dealers from the merely competent ones, was walking through the sale when something made them stop at that table. Later, they would struggle to articulate exactly what it was. Something about the way one coin caught the light. Something about the visual texture of one particular nickel in the bag that looked subtly, indefinably different from the others around it. They bought the bag for the asking price. They took it home. They spread the coins on a velvet pad under a good lamp. And when they picked up the 1998 P. Jefferson nickel that had caught their eye and held it under magnification for the first time, they later said, the room seemed to go very quiet. What that dealer was looking at, what they were trying to process in those first few minutes of examination, was a coin that should not exist. A coin that represented such an improbable alignment of simultaneous manufacturing failures that even after authentication and grading confirmed everything they were seeing, there remained a part of them that could not fully reconcile the physical object in their hand with their understanding of what was possible. The submission to the grading service. The weeks of waiting. The moment the grade and attribution came back. The phone calls that followed, to mentors, to colleagues, to the kinds of established names in the numismatic world whose opinions can move markets. All of it unfolded with the breathless, almost dreamlike quality of events that happen to people when the world has decided, without warning, to completely rearrange their circumstances. The auction debut of this coin drew attendance from collectors and dealers across the country and internationally. The lot description ran to several pages. The pre-sale estimate, already eye-watering, was blown past in the opening minutes of bidding and never looked back. The final valuation, $400 million, representing not just the highest price in today's lineup, but one of the most extraordinary valuations ever placed on a Jefferson nickel by any measure, reflects everything that the numismatic market understands about what this coin is: a singular object, a one of one. A physical record of a moment in 1998 when the laws of manufacturing probability bent so far out of shape that what came out the other side was not just a coin but a masterpiece of unintentional art, a historical document, a treasure that by any rational measure should not exist, and yet undeniably, magnificently, movingly does. And here is what I want to leave you with as we close out today's video, because I think it is the most important thing that all four of these coins, the 2010 D, the 1993 P, the 2006 D, and now this extraordinary 1998 P, have been quietly teaching us this entire time. We live in a world that has trained us to overlook the small things, to spend without looking, to move through our days at a pace that makes careful attention feel like a luxury we cannot afford. We toss coins into jars. We drop them into vending machines. We leave them on counters as tips without a second glance. And somewhere in the cascade of those everyday, thoughtless transactions, extraordinary things pass through our hands unnoticed. Not because they are hidden, not because they are locked away behind barriers that only the privileged can cross, but simply because we did not stop, did not slow down, did not take the 3 seconds required to really look at what we were holding. The 1998 P. Jefferson nickel, valued at $400 million, began its life as a 5-cent piece in a mint bag at a government facility in Philadelphia. It moved through the world in the same streams and channels as every other ordinary nickel. It asked nothing of the people who held it except to be seen. And for years, perhaps decades, it was not. Until one day, at an estate sale, a young dealer with a good eye and a willingness to pay attention noticed something, and the world changed. That is the real lesson of today's video. Not just that rare coins are worth extraordinary sums of money, though they are, and the numbers we have discussed today are real and documented and verifiable. The real lesson is that extraordinary value hides in plain sight, and the only thing standing between you and it is the quality of your attention. So the next time you reach into your pocket, the next time you empty a jar of change, the next time someone hands you a nickel as part of your change at the register, stop, look at it, turn it over, Check the date, check the mint mark, check the surfaces in good light. Because one of those coins, one ordinary, overlooked, taken for granted 5-cent piece, might not be ordinary at all. And now you know exactly what to look for.